Alex is my name. I work in an office, and I'm 28 years old. Before I started working for this company, a lot happened. I was placed in daycare at a young age since my parents owned a small business. Despite being the only child at the time, my parents, grandfather, and I shared a leased apartment. My granddad and I had a tight relationship. I would accompany my grandfather when he went shopping in the evenings because my mom would frequently arrive home late. He was a good man who always got me snacks, cooked rice, laid out the side dishes he bought, and occasionally made curries. I wasn't particularly powerful physically. My mom would leave work to drive me to the doctor whenever I had the flu or something because my granddad was still a full-time employee. However, I can vividly picture her expression of frustration as she said, "You're really a handful." My nights were extremely depressing since my parents' business wasn't going well, and they were constantly fighting over money. When I started elementary school, I had my own room because the apartment was a little roomy, but I couldn't sleep properly because I could often hear them fighting. My grandfather never participated in their disagreements and went to bed early. I frequently stayed at home due to leg discomfort or headaches, even in primary school. "Take it easy," my grandfather would remark as he left in the morning, still working. "Are you not feeling well again?" My mom said, worried, before leaving to work with my dad. She once took me to the doctor after calling the school, but they were unable to diagnose the issue. I occasionally passed out during morning assembly and woke up in the nurse's office, even when I was enrolled in school. I would feel better and go back to class after taking a short break. However, because I was absent a lot, I found it difficult to form friends and was typically left alone. I didn't enjoy school at all, and after courses, I would go straight home and play video games until my grandfather got back. My studies suffered as a result of my irregular attendance at school. Kevin was a boy in the same grade as me who lived close by. I was typically by myself, so I once persuaded Kevin to play video games with me while he brought me the handouts from the days I missed. He smiled as he approached. We had fun playing games together because Kevin's parents worked late too. "Oh, I need to do my homework or my mom will get mad at me," Kevin stated abruptly. As a result, we worked on our assignments together. I didn't understand anything and was already falling behind in my academics. Kevin assisted me with my assignment in a patient manner. But before long, I was unable to attend school on another morning. My mom apparently dropped by a bookstore on her way back from a meeting with my teacher and placed a few reference books on my desk without saying anything. With an inward sigh, I thought, so I have to study. I didn't enjoy studying at all. My mother thought I was just making up a sickness to get out of going to school because she didn't know what was causing it. However, I actually experienced headaches and occasionally stomach pains. Kevin visited again one day. He said, "Hey Alex, are you sick?" "Yeah, I really feel bad in the morning, but the doctor can't figure out why," I responded. Kevin smiled mischievously. "Look, I snuck this into my backpack today," he remarked, grinning as he produced a gaming guide. I became quite excited. I loved playing video games, but I detested learning. Before my birthday, I would go shopping with my grandfather and persuade him to purchase me a game, even though my parents never bought me any software. To avoid my mother discovering it and becoming upset, I kept it tucked away in my desk drawer. Kevin responded, glancing at my study desk, "Oh, reference books. Let me check." Kevin seems to like learning. Taking one of the books, he began jotting down his responses in his notepad. In the meantime, I became absorbed in the game guide that Kevin had loaned me. I played the game by myself, attempting to solve it. By dusk, my grandfather was back at his house. He appeared to be preparing curries that day. It had a wonderful scent. I hadn't eaten lunch that day because I hadn't attended school. "Kevin, if you'd like, you can stay and have dinner with us," my grandfather said as he called us. My granddad offered some curry to Kevin. Kevin said it was exquisite, thanked my papa, and accepted with pleasure. Kevin and I became close friends as a result. "Hey, Alex, could you check the answers in the reference book I worked on?" Kevin asked as he was heading out, and made their way home. I checked the reference book and Kevin's notebook, and he was spot on. By reviewing Kevin's responses, I was able to gain a better understanding of my studies over the course of several days. We were in the early elementary school years at the time, and we eventually advanced to the higher classes. I did, however, occasionally miss school. As usual, my mom would purchase fresh reference books in silence and thump them onto my desk. Kevin and I would complete our schoolwork together and then enjoy playing games at night as I gradually became more motivated to learn. My parents were still fighting over money as usual. I would play video games in an attempt to decompress, but their voices would keep me awake even after taking a bath and going to bed. I would therefore play games late into the night while lowering the volume. In retrospect, I saw that my unpredictable lifestyle probably had a part in my morning sickness. I continued on to junior high school in spite of everything. I was glad to be in the same class as Kevin throughout my first year, but as soon as middle school coursework started, I slipped behind. Kevin became busier and began attending cram schools. We kept walking home together after school because he wasn't too interested in sports clubs either. After taking a bath one evening during my sophomore year of high school, my grandfather passed out. My grandfather never regained consciousness and died, but my mom phoned an ambulance right soon, and I accompanied her to the hospital. On a chilly winter day, my grandfather, whom I loved, had a modest burial. I spent days crying in my room after I got home. I even spent some time weeping in bed and skipping school. After that, I started purchasing meals from convenience stores to eat by myself, and my mom would give me money for dinner. Throughout my middle school years, I continued to have erratic attendance. Kevin concentrated on his schoolwork, and I grew to like a bunch of naughty youngsters from the after-school club. My mother would often groan when I got home, and because there was nothing fun to do there. I began to stay out late, visiting the homes of my naughty friends and occasionally not coming home until after 9 p.m. I would occasionally even spend the night at their house, but I would notify my mother by text, to which she would never respond. Our group leader had a large residence where we were free to play games as much as we liked. I kept skipping school, and my parents, exhausted, stopped even reprimanding me. We got together at convenience stores to get meals and snacks. My friends all appeared to be dealing with family issues of their own. Everyone would congregate at the leader's house, who was incredibly wealthy and would even buy us drinks. The majority of them hardly even went to school. Kevin began to distance himself from me. Perhaps misfortune comes in waves. My parents died in a vehicle accident the year after my grandfather's death. My dad's sister, my aunt, took over because I was at a loss for what to do. I was left alone after losing my family. That day, like the day my grandfather passed away, I was struck with melancholy despite the fact that I wasn't very close to my parents. Another chilly winter day has arrived. My parents' business had to close, but I managed to live in the apartment until I just finished middle school. However, I eventually had to leave because it was a rental. My aunt claims that although I had a respectable amount of life insurance, the majority of the funds were used to pay off my dad's debts and close the business. I gave up on attending high school, of course. I had no desire to go at all. I started living alone in a tiny apartment without a bathroom after my aunt took on the role of guardian. I found a job at a neighboring convenience store because I had to start working right away to support myself. Early in the mornings was when I worked. Brian Smith, the store manager, treated me with kindness and patiently showed me how to do the job. I didn't have time to hang out with my wicked buddies, but I also lost track of them. My morning health started to improve about that time, and I established a pattern, but work kept me so busy that by the time I returned to my apartment, I was worn out. The cherry blossoms tragically dispersed as spring arrived. In order to alleviate my weariness, I began visiting the neighboring historic baths on a daily basis. But with everyday trips, the bathhouse costs started to mount up. I've been eating meals from the convenience shop every day, so I thought it was time to start cooking for myself, even if it was an inevitable expense. I started gradually setting aside money from my paychecks to purchase kitchenware and a rice cooker. I used to visit the grocery store after work to try my hand at cooking and find deals. Despite my inexperience, I frequently thought about how my grandfather would expertly cook. I purchased a portable stove to conserve gas. In addition to adjusting to work and getting by day, I eventually got used to cooking for myself by gathering culinary supplies from a dollar store. I purchased a used, antiquated washing machine, and because I had a balcony, I dried my clothing indoors. Cleaning and shelf stocking were among the hectic jobs at the convenience store. Brian took me out to eat one day. "Alex, is studying something you detest?" he inquired. I answered, "Yeah, I wasn't really a fan." I told Brian about my family situation when I was recruited, so he was aware of it and didn't ask any more questions. However, he laughed and added, "I wasn't too fond of studying either." He went on to say that he will support my future efforts. For the first time, someone other than my mother, who solely urged me to study, gave me encouragement. I made the decision to put in a lot of effort and thanked him before going to the bathhouse. There was a huge mural of Mount Fuji on the wall of the old-fashioned bathhouse. I would frequently gaze at it, allowing it to calm my weary body from work, and then fall asleep peacefully. By conversing with the residents of the same apartment complex at the bathhouse, I began to get to know them. Many of them began frequenting the convenience store to shop after I gained their support for my efforts as a young person. Brian smiled and said, "Alex, it looks like you've made a lot of new friends lately." "They are, in fact, my neighbors," I answered. "They're all nice people who support me," and Brian gave me a kind smile. Then summer arrived. I purchased an air conditioner using my savings. The store had air conditioning, but at night it was too hot to sleep there. When my bathhouse sessions, I would cool off when the air conditioner was installed. Cold noodles became my nighttime staple, and I was also able to save electricity. I liked summer's heat better than winter's chill. The street trees were gorgeously green, and they gleamed from the rain. I often thought about how I had caused my parents so much concern before they unexpectedly passed away, without getting the chance to repay them, and winter always brought back memories of the day I bid goodbye to my grandfather. The summer seemed to go by fast. Kevin showed up to the convenience store one fall day wearing his school uniform. Upon seeing me at the register, he was taken aback. "It's been a long time, Alex. I see you're putting in a lot of effort and remaining on course," Kevin remarked. I answered, "Yeah, I have to work." Kevin grinned and was relieved at how much more at ease I appeared to be. I didn't see Kevin again after that, and winter came around again. The chilly wind pounded my run-down apartment's windows, allowing breezes to enter through the gaps. I purchased a tiny space heater since I didn't think I could make it through the winter. I would frequently find that my body, which had been warmed by the baths, would rapidly cool off because I am rather sensitive to the cold. I started preparing hot pot every day and purchasing Napa cabbage. I experimented with several varieties, occasionally using miso to warm up pork soup, occasionally making spicy hot pot, and occasionally using chicken. My chili body would get hotter if I added more chili powder. I had been employed at the convenience shop for roughly 4 years by that point. When I was 19, I discovered Brian at the workplace with a friend from high school named Matt. Brian said he needed to talk and called me in. "Actually, Alex, the store will relocate to the town's primary hospital. You would have a very difficult commute there. I therefore sought advice from my friend Matt, a classmate. An office clerk is needed by a local company," he said. "Would you be able to work there?" "What? Alex? Me working in the office?" It largely consists of easy computing activities, Matt remarked. I think you can handle it, but it can get pretty busy. I answered, I'm not very good with computers. Matt reassured me, don't worry, it's just entering numbers. I chose to accept Matt's offer since I couldn't afford to lose my job. The commute was convenient because the company was located near a noodle factory. Matt's introduction helped me land the job, despite the fact that I had only completed middle school. After I introduced myself and purchased a suit, a senior coworker gave me a tour of the company. It was my responsibility to phone each of the company's 200 or so customers every day to collect their orders. I had to enter the figures into the computer. Knowing it was only numbers gave me a small sense of relief. Chris, a coworker of mine who was roughly my age, divided the workload with me. I eventually figured things out thanks to his patient instruction. They had hastily publicized the position because it appeared that the previous clerk had departed. Chris and I got along well, and we were about the same age. Although all the bosses were kind, my work was very significant. I had to make calls to supermarkets and noodle shops, check their inventory, and precisely enter the orders into the computer. Chris and I divided the calls as I grew more accustomed to the position, each managing 100 clients. I was a little anxious, but I completed the assignment. But when I got my first paycheck, I was taken aback. Despite being formally employed, I only received roughly $1,300 in take-home income. I had just completed middle school, though. I knew it would be difficult to find another job if I tried, and I had no other skills. I decided to persevere, conserving money where I could and continuing. My former convenience store manager's friend, Matt, who had referred me to this position, sent me an email on my phone one day. I had heard Matt say, "If you ever need anything, just reach out." I responded to his message by saying, "Thanks to you, it's going well." The fact that he was considering me truly moved me. Despite the poor compensation, it was a comfort to work there because of the rather familial atmosphere. Hey, sometimes Mr. Harris, the chairman's son and president, comes by to check the office, Chris told me in a low voice one day. Simply keep your head down and concentrate on your task when he does. I took notice of Chris's advice and thanked him. Actually, I had never laid eyes on the president's face. What sort of guy was he? I wondered. A month or so later, Mr. Harris appeared. Everyone fell silent instantly and proceeded to work hard. Mr. Harris, who had furrowed brows and a severe face, appeared to be in his 40s. Before he left without saying anything, he silently examined each person's computer screen. After that, everyone appeared relieved. Chris later informed me that if something annoyed Mr. Harris, he would get irascible and start ranting. That his visit had gone smoothly gave me a sense of relief. "Alex, one of our client noodle shops, is surprisingly good," Chris commented afterward, and we spent the evening there. Yes, the food was delicious. We divided the cost, of course, but the costs were fair. Time went by as we became closer, and we would occasionally go to other clients' noodle restaurants or get coffee together. I realized I had been mistaken to expect much of a bonus, and my pay went up a little, but it was still a minor raise. It was merely a small increase in my base salary. Before heading to bed, I liked to play mobile games since I had upgraded my phone. Chris and I had a great time playing internet games. It brought back memories of how much I enjoyed playing games as a child. The winter I dreaded came once more. As the town got ready for Christmas, couples strolled around Peeming, and the lights changed to red and blue. Even though it's embarrassing, I don't think I'll ever have a girlfriend. I can hardly make ends meet on my current meager salary, let alone consider dating. I asked Chris if he wanted to go out to a bar with our bonus, but he had a date, so we had to reschedule for the next day. The street trees were withered and covered in snow, which was falling lightly and resembling white cherry blossoms. I missed spring. As I strolled around the streets by myself, snow silently accumulated on my transparent umbrella. As scheduled, Chris and I headed to the bar the following day. The north wind was cold, but the snow had ceased. I occasionally paired a beer with homemade hot pot at home, but this was the first time I went out to drinks with a coworker. We enjoyed some delicious meals after the year-end celebration, and the booze helped to lighten the mood. Chris questioned me about my time in school and how I got a job at the company. I told him how much I hated school and how my grandfather raised me because I had nothing to conceal. Chris stated that he will eventually need to take over his family's modest business. His girlfriend and he have been together since high school. Chris claimed to have heard from top staff members that many people had quit the company as a result of my salary complaint. Chris, however, who was still living at home, didn't appear to be very concerned about money. Then, after the new year, he asked me to take a drive. Despite having a driver's license, Chris admitted that he frequently used his father's vehicle. It was my very first time taking a drive. We ended the evening anticipating our post-New Year's excursion. On the drive home, I felt heated, perhaps because of the alcohol. I often walk 30 minutes to get to work. The city is near to where I reside. Chris and I joked and took our time returning, making the walk, which typically felt lonely, more pleasurable and lasting roughly 40 minutes. The excitement of New Year's has never really been felt by me. Although the alcohol tasted delicious, I never overindulged even as an adult, since I had vague memories of my dad drinking constantly and whining to my mom. I suppose my mom never allowed my dad to overcome her because she had a strong will. I took a few days off when work ended for the year, but nothing noteworthy occurred. I simply carried on with my thrifty routine. I took some time to relax, play games, and treat myself to a slightly more expensive spa treatment. I went for a stroll around the neighborhood since I was bored and saw that the community center that had once stood there had been destroyed. Had it been moved, I wondered. I often sit at a desk, so I moved a lot that day, which was unusual for me. I noticed a lot of elderly folks walking their dogs, and there were a good number of detached homes even in the metropolis. I'd always wanted a dog as an only child, but leased apartments didn't allow dogs, and naturally, my present apartment didn't allow them either. With my meager wage, I reasoned, I probably couldn't afford to care for a dog, even if I could have one. I was really pessimistic about the future. I resorted to my typical hobby of playing games as an escape from reality. As promised, Chris asked me to go for a drive in the new year. He picked me up close to where I lived. The car was really opulent because the road in front of my apartment was little. I became aware of my legs trembling instinctively as I settled into the passenger seat. Even I was taken aback, and Chris noticed and inquired about my well-being. I became aware that the car had brought back memories of the car accident my parents had been in. After I confided in Chris, he assured me, "Don't worry, I'll drive safely." The shaking eventually stopped, and after 2 hours or so of driving, we came to a picturesque mountain road. I liked the natural scenery and the town's outlook from the hills. I felt really content when I got home. I was initially startled by my own phobia of driving, but the expansive natural surroundings calmed me down. After the New Year's holiday ended, work resumed. I tried my hardest not to make any blunders. I discovered that the vacant area where the community center once stood had been transformed into a little park one Sunday while I was on a stroll. I began traveling that route after realizing it would decrease my commute while strolling through the park. It also shortened the walk to the baths the following day. I started going to the park every day after that. The park's cherry blossoms were stunning in the spring. There were now more than 300 clients at work. With each of us managing 150 clients, Chris and I divided the burden. I was able to arrive home at my regular time. I started to take my time walking the route because I had a specific time to wake up in the morning. Now that I had a shorter commute, I took deep breaths before leaving and appreciated the flowers in the park. For me, even the winter seemed drawn out and challenging. It felt like spring and summer went by so quickly. The summer soon gave way to the lonesome autumn of falling foliage. It was still unbearably hot when I visited the graves in September, and a homeless man moved into the park I frequented every day. It was a little unnerving, but there was something about the man's face that made me think of my grandfather, who had died too young. His profile had a remarkable similarity. On my walk home from work one hot evening, I saw that the homeless man appeared to be in poor health, most likely as a result of the heat. Since I assumed he wouldn't be able to pay for the medical bills, I decided to buy him a bottle of water from a vending machine instead of calling for an ambulance. "Are you okay?" I asked him as I walked up to him. He appeared to be awake. After giving him the drink, I left for home. I was relieved to discover that the homeless man was sleeping well on a bench and had improved in appearance the next morning. As the chill of winter drew near, the street trees became scarlet with fall foliage. Chris's father unexpectedly died of a disease around that time. Chris was compelled to quit the company early in order to take over the family business as a result. Before our farewells, I thanked Chris for everything. After that, I had to take over Chris's responsibilities, which included entering data and taking phone orders for more than 300 clients. This, of course, resulted in a great deal of overtime. A replacement clerk would be employed shortly, according to my employer, but it took a while for anyone to show up. As the days got busier, mistakes happened from time to time, and many days were spent apologizing to clients over the phone for their grievances. My employer frequently had to rush out to make deliveries because the clients were upset about shortages, and I had to apologize to him more often as a result. Winter wasn't easy. My body was exhausted, and I was often arriving home late. Weary from the day, I struggled home in the cold. Despite my lack of appetite, I made the decision to warm up at the baths. The typical homeless man was shivering and freezing in the cold when I arrived. I returned to my apartment and gathered an old jacket I no longer wore, some clean sweatpants, extra towels, and one of my 2 blankets. "It's much too cold out here, sir," I said to the homeless man. "Use this blanket, please." I went on. "There's a bathhouse close by if you like. How about we both go together? You can get warmed up. You can change into some of the outfits I provided. You're the one who brought me a drink the other day, young man. That was incredibly beneficial to me." The old man followed me gently to the baths and said, "If you're offering, then I'll go with you." The owner of the bathhouse remained silent because it was almost time to close. I lent the elderly man some shampoo, packed his clothing in a small bag, and we showered together. After hurriedly cleaning myself, I assisted in washing his back. We both relaxed in the hot bath as the man grinned. I brought a jacket, and he warmed up nicely, changed into my clean clothing, and departed the baths. He remarked, "You saved my life twice now, young man," as I carried him back to the park while keeping the blanket wrapped around him for warmth. Then he cuddled under the blanket on the bench. I returned to my apartment, disposed of the man's old clothing, and went to bed early since I was exhausted. The man was still sleeping comfortably when I woke up the following morning. I arrived at work and got to work on my regular duties. Mr. Harris abruptly entered the office while I was taking orders, trying to serve all 300+ clients. After observing me working at my computer in silence for some time, he suddenly said, "Alex, our clients have been complaining a lot about your recent errors. You're finished here. There's no point in coming in tomorrow." "Are you going to fire me?" I objected, saying, "I've been trying my hardest to manage the workload of 2 people. Stop talking. Excuses are not what I want to hear. You're fired. I'm the president, and I'm saying that." Mr. Harris yelled. "I understand," I answered. I collected my belongings in the quiet office, thanked my managers, and walked out of the business. After being abruptly let go in that manner, I trudged back to my flat through the sunny afternoon streets. "Young man, are you off work already today?" Someone asked me as I was walking through the park. Upon closer inspection, I saw that it was the typical homeless man. He had shaved his beard and chopped his hair. I estimated his age to be approximately 75, yet he looked so much younger that I hardly recognized him. After I took a seat beside him on the bench, I added, "Actually, I just got fired from my job." "Well then, shall we go?" the elderly gentleman asked. Despite my lack of understanding, I followed him slowly. He guided me to the front door of an upscale apartment complex. He entered after unlocking the door. He unlocked the door to a spacious apartment after we rode the elevator to the top floor. "What is this location?" I inquired. The elderly man handed me a business card and declared, "This is my home." Asterisk Stephen Sullivan, chairman of SS Foods, asterisk it said. "You're the chairman, right?" I was surprised. It was the most amazing place I had ever seen, and the view beyond the windows was stunning. "It's much too large for me. I want it for you. I found a purpose to live a bit longer because of you, and you saved my life twice," he stated. I gave him my name when he asked. The intercom buzzed at that moment. "Are you at home, grandfather?" A woman's voice stated, "I'm coming up now." She taught me a lot about Stephen. Yvonne, the woman, was the elderly man's granddaughter. She clarified that Stephen had resorted to drink and ended up in the hospital following the death of his wife. Yvonne would occasionally stop over to clean the flat, and she was unable to locate her grandfather once he was released from the hospital. He refused to go back to the apartment, but she ultimately located him in the park. He clarified that he no longer needed such a large flat and that staying at home caused him to drink excessively. The spouse of Yvonne's mother, who had assumed the role of president, was in charge of the business. SS Foods, Stephen's company, was a large corporation that owned numerous supermarkets. Stephen called Mr. Harris, the president of the noodle company I had worked for, as soon as he learned the reason for my termination. "Hi, Mr. Harris. It's Stephen Sullivan. After you wrongfully fired Alex for taking on an impossible task, I made the decision to stop doing business with your company." "Please, this can't be," said Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Harris stumbled, but Stephen cut the call off without saying anything more. He smiled at me after putting the phone on speaker so I could hear it. Stephen severed my connection with the organization I was employed by, he claimed. He had been told by friends how hard I was working. I went out for a fancy sushi dinner that evening, and shortly after, Stephen gave me the apartment. I made the opulent skyscraper my home. Stephen laughed hysterically as I ran around the apartment like a child because I couldn't believe it. I began learning how to operate a computer from Yvonne, who worked from home. When I finally got a job at Stephen's company as an office clerk, my pay tripled. Being of the same age, Yvonne and I became close and soon began dating, which ultimately resulted in our marriage. I invited Stephen to move in with us, but he said he intended to live close by. He was thrilled, and today we all three reside in the high-rise apartment together. I am expecting our first child with my wife. The way fate operates is peculiar. My life was transformed by only 2 modest acts of kindness for Stephen. My grandfather seems to have returned to me now, and I made a commitment to keep Stephen and my family safe going forward.